there's another chapter in this saga, so to speak. And I'm not telling this story because of my own predicament. Compared to my colleagues in the occupied territories, my colleagues in the universities in the occupied territories, there's no comparison. It pales in comparison to what they're going through. But it's part of the same picture of the demise of Israeli democracy, the demise of respect for basic human rights and civic rights. So before the saga, I should say that after the events or after the failed attempt to expel me, I'm being boycotted in this university. I cannot participate in seminars. I mean, this is conferences, symposia. Not officially. Nobody would admit to it officially. But let's say the Department of History wants to organize, and this has happened. They want to organize a conference of the 1948 history, and they invite me, and they publish the fact that I would be one of the speakers. Immediately the authorities would call them to take my name out. And I think the most, and I will email you one of the responses to that boycott by someone who doesn't like my views, and definitely not on my side, but he rightly said so, that the most terrifying thing of what happened to me is not what happened to me, but the fact that nobody of my colleagues have stood against what they did to me. And knowing from Germany, they could be next. They could be next. I mean, it was amazing. It was less the stupidity of the management here, that they decided that they can, chase me out. It is the fact that you have 600 university lecturers, and not one of them came out and said, come on, you can't do this. You may not like his views, but you cannot. Not in a normal university. You don't do this, and then you claim that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. You can't do this. And anyway, they have, and it goes on. I wanted to break the boycott, so I organized the conference, and I decided to ignore the messages I got from above, that no, you cannot have a conference in university, you are barred from having conferences. I went to the administration and I booked a room. Now, as you know, universities, there is the different wings, and nobody knows what the other. I'm a lecturer. I ask for a room. I get a room. Okay. So I published the fact that I have a room and I'll have a conference. And the conference was about the historiography of the 1948 war. I get there with the speakers, and quite a large crowd, not too large. And there are 10 security people with pistols and walkie-talkies. And I went there with my wife, and the chief security officer in the university pushes me to a nearby room in front of my wife and my other colleagues. Was shocked. They'd never seen such a thing at Haifa University. He hands me a letter, a personal letter, from the president of the university, prohibiting me to have the conference because it's a severe breach of the of the university codex, which is ridiculous because the codex allows a lecturer to have a conference, and that I would not be allowed, and the room is blocked, and the security guard would make sure that I would not have the conference. And just before they pushed me into a room, the security officer informed the president in the walkie-talkie, we caught him. As if they've caught Osama ibn Laden, we caught him. He cannot have the conference. And then we reached the following agreement, that I would sit in the cafeteria with my guests, and provided I do not stand up, or not elevate myself, this would not be a conference. This would be a social gathering. And this is more or less the situation nowadays. So it gives you and again, I'm not telling this because of my own personal predicament, because it's an indication of the level of freedom of speech and freedom of academic freedom in Israel in these times. So, unless proven otherwise, I don't think we are seeing any significant change in the basic Israeli mentality and perception of the reality. And that perception of the reality, if I will try to articulate it, I would say it's the following, is that basically what matters in the world is the American position. And what matters in our relationship with the Palestinians and the Arab world are two things: our own power, our own capabilities, and the American position. Everything else is irrelevant. the United Nations position, the Western position, the world position, even the civil society in America. In America, if they have a different position than the administration, and even in administration, not everybody matters. Secretary of State doesn't matter. Because of that combination, that we are still very powerful militarily, and because the people who matter are behind us, the American administration, we in fact can do whatever we want in our relationship with the Palestinians. And what do we want in our relationship with the Palestinians? We want by force to impose a solution that caters to our interests and needs. And what we want is to annex parts of the West Bank so that we can include the major settlement blocks in it, so that we won't have to go into an internal civil war. They don't mind if you call the other half of the West Bank a Palestinian state. I think they would like to push the Palestinians from the part that they annexed to the part that will become a Palestinian state. Anyway, they don't think the Palestinian state would survive. Definitely they don't want to talk about any reasonable solution to the refugee problem or the Jerusalem problem. And they think that with time, power and force would impose the solution in such a way that it would become part of the Middle Eastern reality. Now, they also think that they have all the right to deal very forcefully with the Palestinians inside Israel. If they would show even the slightest ideas of autonomy, or they will show a collective will to act so as to change the present situation. As for the, what shall we call them, the silent majority, those people who, I'm not sure they're not showing interest. I think it's true that on one level, many of them find life more harder than previous years because of the economic crisis. It's true that many of them find politics repugnant. In a way, it's something they don't want to deal with. But the principal reason why the Israeli political system can go on with the same policies is because that silent majority also harbors certain images and perceptions of the Palestinians as well. I think Israeli Jewish society is a racist society. It dehumanizes the other Arab, and definitely the Palestinians. This is something that they suckle from a very early stage in their life. It's part of the socialization, part of the educational system in Israel. From cradle to grave, you get a certain message about who the Palestinians are, how should they be treated, and that's, in a nutshell, it's a very dehumanized way of looking at the Palestinians. And if you dehumanize someone, you can look at a TV and watch people are being killed, babies being killed of the other side, and not at all get excited or ask yourself. I'll give you one example. There is a unit in the Israeli army which belongs to the spokesperson of the army. And their job is to go and film for the army's propaganda. And I have a soldier who serves there, he's one of my students. And he told me that when they really are doing a good job, they get a certain perk. They get some sort of special prize. What is the prize? Is to get from the army, in slow motion, the film in which the Israeli Air Force dropped a bomb of 1,000 kilos on the residential area in Gaza, which killed a lot of children and women in order to kill one terrorist. And this is the prize of the soldiers. And they will love watching it, because you can see exactly, because it was taken from the aircraft. So you can zoom on the destruction, on the killing. This is the kind of mentality and reality which allows people to be bystanders, not only to things that already had been done to the Palestinians, but I am very fearful that these people would be bystanders even when worse things would be inflicted upon the Palestinians. I made a few years ago a film which actually followed the lecture tour I gave in Britain. And its title was The State of Denial, Israel as a State of Denial. And it followed certain phases in the way the Israeli establishment denies what had happened in 1948, denies what happens in the occupied territories, and even denies what happened lately in the occupied territories. And the film was very pessimistic, and I felt that. It was very dark in a way. But I finished it in a more optimistic tone. I said to the viewers there that, you know, I showed you in the film how much is invested in Israel in denying, in making sure people do not know. Which means that they think that if people would know, they would react very differently. They were probably, out of their Jewish history, out of their personal morality, would say, not in our name. We don't want to hear about it. It's very convenient not to know. But if you start to know, you start to be troubled and you react. So I think that I'm optimistic. In time, people would know. It's a matter, first of all, that people do not know. And when people would know, there is a chance for a different reaction. So my guess is that people are not indifferent. People are very happy with not knowing. It serves very well the government. You know, they're trying now to put out of the television screen CNN and BBC World Service because they know how easy you can get here in Israel. Because they know how easy with zapping you can get it by mistake to CNN, and God knows, I mean, we know CNN, we know BBC World Service. It's not the pro-Palestinian television broadcast. But just even that terrifies them, that people would see it a little bit more neutral. It's tragic, it's discouraging, but on the other hand, it's very encouraging. Because it means that they know that the reality is so obvious now. What can justify 3-5 tanks going through a village and just destroying it, for whatever reason, and killing of children and women? Nothing. And they know it. So they'd rather not deal with the explanation, they'd rather not show the pictures. We have to understand, Israeli viewers see very little of what goes on in the occupied territories compared to viewers outside. And now that the Israelis have started killing journalists and intimidating the others, probably the world at large will see less what is going on inside. So coming back to your major question there about people being indifferent, I'm not sure they're being indifferent. I sort of give fine-tuning to that definition. They live in denial and are oblivious to what's happening because someone makes sure that they will remain in that situation. I think that exposing the reality for what it is something which eventually even start a movement of opposition inside Israel. I think it's very, very important because the Israelis, and also the Israelis are decent people. If they start judging their own actions and the actions that have been done in their names according to universal human values, they will not be able to look at the mirror. I have an article which is called Breaking the Mirror. And I wrote in that article saying that the Israelis still have mirrors installed in their homes where they don't see their own reflection. They see a poster, and I want to break that